Welcome back, everybody. This episode of the Open Concept Podcast, where we are breaking down those unnecessary walls and barriers that stand in the way of greatness. Our guests today join us all the way from the winter months of New Jersey. Right now, we tried to record previously, but there was a bit of a snowstorm, a bit of an outage. But JP, Rinylo, appreciate you being here. What is up, brother? How you doing?
What's up, Brandon? I'm doing well, and coincidentally, it is snowing today.
We tried to record twice. Once was on your end due to the snowstorm, and then I came down with some sort of stomach bug thing and had to postpone. But we're here. We're doing the thing, man.
We've made it happen.
For the listeners out there, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? We were recording half of a podcast offline before we even said, like, hey, maybe we should start hitting that record button and get some stories out there. But we were having fun.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the preamble to our conversation now. Yeah, I mean, I could go down the full pitch of who I am from a business perspective, but I think that's boring. The more exciting stuff is how I got here. I've realized. Go ahead.
No, we were talking off point. Well, we'll get into the business stuff in a second for sure. We were pretty hot and heavy getting into talking about fitness, and we were talking about jiu-jitsu. We were talking about MMA, and you were telling me how involved you've been over your life in CrossFit. Yeah, you told me not to judge you, which I'm not. I'm not judging you. I love how you preempted the conversation with though, because you must get that a lot if you're telling people you do CrossFit and get some feedback.
It's got the cult following kind of stigma and stereotype that goes along with it. So that's what I was trying to get ahead of. I'm fortunate that jiu-jitsu community seems to kind of have that same feeling sometimes. How do you know when a guy does jujitsu? Because he never stops talking about jujitsu. It's the same thing about CrossFit. Yeah. How do you know when a guy does CrossFit? Because he never stops talking about CrossFit. I'm not that guy anymore, but it's because I've been doing it for, like I said to you, prior, about 15 to 16, maybe almost 17 years. I've been married. Actually, I started it the summer I got married. I got married in 2008. So July of 2008 is when I started CrossFit.
It's a long time. It's a big commitment to something. And what, the one thing that CrossFit has done very well, I mean, there's a lot of things, but it really has brought a lot of attention, a lot of awareness, and a lot of excitement around lifting in general and fitness in general. So it's it doesn't really matter, right? You build this cult following over anything. Net, it's doing, I think, a lot of great things for the community.
Yeah. I think it's a very unspoken benefit or feature of the CrossFit community that you get to learn new things. That's a big part of the mission. I think when Greg Glassman, who originally founded it, when he first started it, one of the recommendations was that you use CrossFit as a way to prepare yourself for everyday, everything's to happen in everyday life. Now, the way that you Olympic lift a barbell off the ground is not something you're going to use in your everyday life. But, if you work on a farm, you're probably picking up pretty heavy bags of flour or grain or feed or whatever. If you are a nurse or a medical, in the medical field, you might be moving patients around. So there are applications. Now that's me stretching a bit, but in a more, I'll say, familiar for most folk sense, his encouragement is try different sports, do different activities, go outside, walk on different terrain. Those were the things at the very beginning of CrossFit that he was teaching. And I don't know if you know this much about CrossFit, but when he was teaching what were basically soccer moms in a garage, how to get fit, he was just encouraging them to get the hell out of the house and stop and to get the hell out of the gym. Go be active in life. And that really appealed to me when I first started hearing about it. And, that's how I got well, I think the question you didn't ask is how I got into it, but I got into it the summer I got back from the week I got back from my honeymoon. It was the summertime and I was a little frustrated with myself, not with anything else, related to, my fitness and stuff. I was a little frustrated with myself that I hadn't gotten into the shape I wanted to get into for my wedding. And I was talking to a buddy of mine, Rich, and he said, yeah, dude, he's like, your mindset's wrong. He's like, you don't get in shape for your wedding. You get in shape for your life.
Yeah.
And from that point forward, he started helping me kind of like find, we'll call it training modalities that fit with like my lifestyle and my personal drive and my high performance mentality. And I'll never forget, he handed me my notebook. I used to keep notebooks with workouts that he would write for me. And he handed me a notebook, and all he wrote on it was CrossFit.com. Now, we're going to go back in time for a moment. This is before iPhones. This is before like real smartphones. I had like a Motorola Q, which I don't know if you know what that is, but it was like the beginning of smartphones.
I mean, even that, I remember my BlackBerry that I had, and that was like the coolest thing ever because it had a full keyboard on it, so you didn't have to do the T9 texting anymore, where you hit the button 3 times to get a letter, and it's stuff that a lot of people, this next generation are just never gonna understand.
No,
you had to what? You had to.
Well, imagine me telling Brandon. Imagine me telling that story. Or the story I'm telling you now, kind of like related to my beginnings in CrossFit, to the kids who I'm now, because we're also talking about the young bucks in jiu-jitsu that are also the young bucks in CrossFit. Like when they're like, so how long have you been doing CrossFit? Or, oh, are you new to CrossFit? Because they see the gray and the white and the, like the thinning hairline, and they're like, oh, so how long have you been doing CrossFit? Are you new? I'll be like, I started a long time ago. They'll be like, oh, well, how long ago? I've been doing it for 6 years, they'll say. And they're like 24. And I'll be like, 16, 17 years. And you're like, what?
Well, that's what I was saying with jiu-jitsu. Like when I started, there wasn't it wasn't a mainstream sport. Now there's jiu-jitsu gyms on every corner. And finding information, like you would buy, you find old DVDs with information, or you buy a DVD, or somebody would hand it to you and say like, hey, go watch this. There's some, movements and some techniques that you can find. But then it exploded in popularity, and especially with UFC getting so popular, and people wondering, what's happening down there when they're down on the ground. And it's bred a whole like new ecosystem of jiu-jitsu, and it's popularized the sport, and it's created some like really, really big names. And now the athletes, like you would go as if you were going to train jiu-jitsu, like and do anything professionally, the only way there was like to win tournaments, travel the world and win tournaments, and the payout wouldn't be that much. You'd be like a few $1,000 or maybe 10,000, 10 grand on like the high end, or own a gym. And like that would be the only way to do it. And now there are mega superstars in the industry that are, paving the way for these next generations of kids that are coming up with just a huge amount of information at their fingertips with, YouTube and constant just like Instagram updates of just new techniques, and just widely available information anywhere you look.
It's one of the things, CrossFit, jiu-jitsu, I'll say even just like fitness in general, kind of going back to one of the points you made earlier, fitness in general, because of the internet and because of the amount of information available around different modalities and different training types and different fitness levels and things that, for me, at my age, I wish I had when I was 15, 16, 17 available to me. Because now 30 years later, approaching 45, it's like, I'm looking at my son, who I mentioned earlier, I think offline, who's going to be 14. And he's coming to me with, hey, have you ever heard of, and then he'll name the thing. I'm like, yeah, but I never did. He's like, oh, look, this is how you do it. And then it'll be like a move in, CrossFit that I can do for, a rep or two, but he can like flip upside down and run around on his hands or something like that. Because he watched a video online. It's a pretty wild, even with the whole like dawn of AI now, like we're living in some wild times right now.
Well, it's the same thing. And you talk about the transition, understanding, life you remember life before the internet, right? We all remember life before AI because that was only a couple of years ago or before it became mainstream. But
Yeah.
now, kids getting out of high school or in high school, they're going into this world just with this idea that AI is always at their fingertips. They maybe didn't quite understand it, but they're getting a huge grasp of it, and they're going to spend the next 30 years with it just getting wildly, incredibly better and better and faster and more intuitive. And it's going to be really wild to see. My oldest daughter, she's 4.5, and I'm trying to figure out how to explain that to her. And I'm just at a point where I'm like, she's going to adapt. She's going to grow up. She's going to figure it out just like all the other kids are. And they're going to kind of figure it out together, and life's going to be okay. But yeah, it's pretty wild, man, how that stuff just happens quick.
It is. I know we've kind of moved on a little bit there from the CrossFit topic, but I did want to touch on, this is a season for CrossFit right now that's called the Open season. I don't know if you've ever heard, but there's like a competition. It's a worldwide open competition. And so what it looks like is anyone who's in the CrossFit community goes to a CrossFit gym. If it's an affiliated CrossFit gym, you have the opportunity to participate in doing the open workout. So there's 3 workouts that are released every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So it's at noon West Coast, right? Noon Pacific.
Yeah.
But it's announced each Thursday for the next 3 Thursdays. So the first one just occurred this past Thursday. And then on Friday at my gym, at my CrossFit gym that I go to, they do what's called Friday Night Lights. So it's a throwdown style. And so again, back to your point, like there I am with like the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds and the teenagers, like one of the teenagers there. I remember coaching this kid when he was like, I think he's 16 or 15 now. I was coaching this kid, not coaching, but I was coaching classes while this kid was running around, and he was like 7.
Yeah.
Now he beat my score for the what's called the RX time for for the RX division. So yeah, it's a pretty, like when we start talking about CrossFit, like I mean, I have my open score right here from what I just performed last Friday. Today's the deadline for submitting your first scores, and then we have, like I said, 2 more weeks coming. So I can talk about CrossFit for a long time.
Hell yeah. Well, it's I think that, like, back to your point, just getting outside and moving, doing something different, trying something that you enjoy. I mean, is something that most people talk about doing, but they have trouble doing because they feel like, all right, I'm gonna try out this new gym, but it's gonna be a lot of work, and like I gotta get in shape before I go to the gym, and before I get in shape, I gotta go out and I gotta buy a new pair of shorts and a new pair of shoes, and then I gotta buy some lifting gloves, and like before I do that, like I gotta start eating better, and I gotta go out and get some protein and some pre-workout, and it becomes this big complicated thing, whereas
it doesn't really have to be.
You just kind of got to show up and take that first step, and like everything else will follow suit if you don't overcomplicate it in your mind. But getting out, moving around, and finding something that you enjoy doing, I mean, if it has any sort of vascular benefit to it or metabolic. Real quick before we get back to the show, if you have heard anything on this podcast that has resonated with you, or if it's helped you in any way, appreciate more than anything in the world if you could go hit that subscribe button or leave us a review. It helps us tremendously. I want to go back to being able to continue to serve and do more and more and help out and get bigger and bigger guests on, better and better. The only way that I can do that is with your help. I'm so honored to be here. Let's get back to the show. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. Benefit to it, then that's it's
better than doing nothing.
Absolutely.
You're touching on that, the whole concept of, I mean, I don't think you meant it for me to hear it this way, but I kind of did, which is, it's the whole like be, do, have. Like you have to be the thing and do the things in order to have things that are related to the people who do what you're, who are what you're being, like, or some version of that. But at the same time, like you don't have to, like, it makes me think of like, remember Caddyshack, Ronnie Dangerfield.
Yeah. Of course.
Remember when he showed up, he had no idea how to golf, but he showed up to the golf course and he had all the gadgets, right? Yeah. It's like even for myself, many years ago, recently, I've adopted the much more be, do, have, and the much more like just start, just get like starting my own business in the last, year plus, like a year and 2 months ago. I thought I had to have like, we've probably subscribed to a lot of the same material where it's like, well, I gotta get my website, and I gotta get my letterhead, and I gotta get like all. You don't need any of that shit, man. Like just start. Go like in business, go sell something. When it comes out to work, when it comes to working out or fitness, just go for a walk, and just make it 5 minutes. If walking's not been your thing for a long time, start with 5 minutes, or start with a mile. Make it a goal to get to 2 miles. Make it a goal to get to 3 miles. Set a timeline for how long you want to do that for. Brandon, like you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, man, he's describing when I was building my garage gym. So I was this is before COVID. I've worked from home for 14 and a half years. So before it was a thing, like I was working from home. Same space. I was on that side of the room instead of this side of the room. But when you were saying like, so you have to, I have to get this and I have to get that before I can get started. I got to do this. I got to get the gym sneakers. For my garage gym, it was like, I would not do a workout in the garage gym until the flooring I wanted was down. Like the rubber flooring I wanted was down. The lighting was right. The walls didn't have insulation, falling out of them. Like I was like, it wasn't a fear thing. It was just like a mentality thing. Like I was my own blocker. No, I can't cancel my CrossFit gym membership until I have my garage gym set up. Because I was going to just continue doing CrossFit in the garage gym, but I was trying to save money and I was working from home. So I was like, well, why? If I can this is when I thought like never leaving home was going to be cool. Like, oh, I'll work from home. I'll work out in the garage. Then I'll go back in the house and work. And then eventually I combine my garage gym and my office into one space. Don't do that. That was it was such a great concept and such a terrible, like, outcome once it was in place. But anyway,
well, I
digress.
I tell a story about when I started the podcast, right? And I was like, it's the same thing, all these barriers of like, researching all this equipment that you need, mics, roadcasters,
headphones,
all that sort of stuff. But I said, you know what, I just got to start. Like, I know it's not going to be great. Nobody's going to be listening. So let's go. And then I had started just basic webcam, and that's it. And then over time had started recording a couple of episodes, and I was like, all right, this is good, getting into it. And then you can upgrade little bits and pieces of equipment as you go. And then, over a year into it now, have upgraded the camera, have a new monitor, have new lighting, have, new inputs, new mic stand.
You went pro.
But I have this mentality of now, which I didn't have, of, okay, I'm just going to start. And if I can stay committed to it and something that I feel like I can continue to invest time into for a long period of time, then I will 100% continue to commit to getting better and better and better. But I mean, the first few episodes, like you can go back to episode 4, and it was like really, I left it up there. I released it, and it was there's this really awkward pause because I was a solo episode, and I had this like blank moment where I forgot what I was talking about. I was just kind of in flow state, and then totally forgot about what I was talking about.
Like how you got where you were, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then I forgot to go back and edit that out because I wasn't doing much editing. And then so that huge long pause is now released on the episode. And I thought about it. And I thought, I should go in and delete it and remove it and cut it out and redo this. And I said, you know what, I'm going to just leave it there. So on episode 100, I can go back and I can tell people and tell others to go back and listen to the 4th episode, like these early episodes, because they sucked. But it was this idea of just walking before you run, and for me, it was just more important to start and just build the plane on the way down. Right, it's like jump off that cliff and start putting the plane together.
Brandon, you and I have a lot we could probably cover on these topics. Again, we subscribe to a lot of the same media outlets, and I'll just mention Dan Martell and the whole elite community that you and I are both a part of. But what you just said reminds me of a card that an old boss handed me on my last day of work at the company that she and I were working at together. And this is a good story that could be a much longer conversation, but I'll just stick to the main point, which is that she said, listen, she handed me the card, and she was really excited, but also sad. right? And she's like, I don't want you to open this card until you get outside the building. And so I was working in Philadelphia at the time. I was working in a high rise. And so I put the card in my bag, finished up the day. And when I got outside into the lobby area, I was getting ready to walk to the train because I used to train into the city from here in Jersey. And I opened the card, and there were just a couple words on the inside from Nicole, but on the front of the card, and I know I have it. Like, I think I have it in this cabinet over here. Front of the card, it said, "Leap, and the net will appear." And like those words have just stood in my brain for all of what is now I'm realizing, like the beginning of kind of like the career that I'm in now, or the career path I've been in now for the last 15 years, working from home, etc. It was like I had just quit a career or a job that I thought would be a career that many people thought, dude, this is your career. Like, what are you quitting for? And it was because I was unhappy. I was burnt out at that job. I was doing things I didn't want to do. And I loved all the people I worked with, but yeah, she handed me that card and it said, "Leap, and the net will appear." And I've lived by that mantra for 15 years now.
Why do you think people are afraid that that net won't appear? As if you're thinking,
Question.
if you're thinking, I mean, that's, I love that, by the way. I think that's tremendous advice. It's easier said than done for a lot of people, because there may not be, whether it's a sense of confidence, sense of self-ability to build that net. I think that there's a lot of uncertainty, right, about what the future looks like if you don't have all the pieces in place. And a lot of people, they do want to know what these pieces are going to look like. And myself, I used to be the same way for a lot of years, right? Over analyzing situations, analyzing the best move, trying to optimize for the best potential circumstance. And the reality is like, man, everything is going to change 5 years from now, right? You can take this one step in one direction and think you're making the right move, and it will probably land you in a place that you've never expected. And so handing over, I think the trust into a greater power, some will call it God, some will call it the universe, some will call it a higher existence, whatever that is a really tough thing for people because they don't want to give up that control. But I'd be curious to hear, when people leap, what are they afraid of? Why do they not believe that net is going to appear?
Such a good question. It's hard for me to separate what I think for my reasons as opposed to what I think are for others. So I'll kind of do like a little bit of a hybrid because I think mine are similar to others, but not at this stage in my life as so much as what they were probably 15 years ago, 16 years ago, actually, right before I made the decision to leap in that scenario. Because by the way, while I've said it's been a mantra of mine, to your exact point, I've not always lived by it, right? I've listened to it in my head. It's been back here for 15 years, but it's not always been front and center. It's not always been projecting in how I live my life. Year and a half, or 2.5 years, 2 years ago, coming up on, it was. But I'm jumping around in timelines. I'll stick to your question first. I think there's a non-conformity. There's a fear of non-conformity there. It's like, especially as you're growing up after you graduate college. Actually, I'll say it this way. If you go to high school and then your plan is to go to college and you go to college, after college, there's an expectation. There's an expectation from your parents. There's an expectation from your peers. There's an expectation from anyone who's involved in helping you to accomplish the graduation exercise. Or if it's not college, if it's you went to trade school or you started a business or whatever that thing is that you did to demonstrate progression, there's an expectation associated to that from others. And because by just our human nature, we are predisposed to connection to want to be connected and stay connected to others, there is a fear that if I do something that's non-conformist, non-traditional, unexpected, especially the unexpected, if it's not expected, like especially if it's unexpected from loved ones.
Yeah.
If I do something outside of that box that everyone else seems to be in, you might get kicked out of the box. That's what I believe is a big part of the fear of leaping and the net not appearing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love that answer. I think that there's a lot to that, and I think the idea of starting over is pretty scary for a lot of people, because you feel like you're giving this thing up that you spent so much time and energy and effort putting into. But the reality is you aren't starting from nothing. You aren't starting from the beginning again. You're starting from a very different point, but now with all of the experience that you've gained along the way. So you're not that same person, not that same person now that you were over, building yourself, whether it's finance, whether it's education, whether it's experience over 16 years, but you still feel that way going into, these new tasks, new ventures. You still feel that same way as when you entered that workforce 16 years ago. You sort of still feel like you're that same person, but you don't give yourself enough credit. And I'm speaking from experience here, right? You don't give yourself enough credit for the time and the repetitions that you've put in, the time under the bar, the squats that you've been doing, the weight that you've been lifting. Like, you're walking into it a lot stronger than you were originally.
Yeah, I appreciate the I have an appreciation for the metaphors and the analogies you were using there. It's left me in this moment while we're talking, it's left me thinking about, like, when did I become more comfortable taking the different leaps that I've taken? And you were talking about experience, and it's not just probably not where you and I would expect the conversation to go, or maybe you, but definitely something I can't help but think of is, like, there's they're not expectations. There's experiences that occur not in direct line with your career or your ambitions or your motivations in life for accomplishing certain things or helping certain things, people accomplish certain things. Like, there are things that occur that you had no control over and you could have never anticipated, and those impacts will lead to an experience that will leave you completely different than what you were before they showed up. And I'll give you an example for what might seem a little like nebulous. Over my shoulder here is a placard for the breast cancer symbol, and that is a perfect example of the experiences that I've had in my life that have led me to just kind of figuring shit out on the fly, because I didn't know that was going to happen. My wife, who is still very healthy, was diagnosed with breast cancer at an age where we would have never expected, let alone ever expected, that it could have become a part of our lives. And using the timeline I've referenced a few times, like 15, 16 years in my career that I'm in now, it happened like smack dab in the middle. We had two babies on our hands. We had a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a, barely 1-year-old on our hands. And, I was like, right when that happened, I was in the best shape of my life. I was crushing it in my career for what I was doing at the time. I was, my wife was doing amazing things in her life at the time. Like, we were just in like such a great place, and to have such a strong situation presented to us to deal with in a way that there's no playbook for that, buddy. Mm-hmm. They could tell you there's treatment plans, like that symbol is really about, like, how do you fight? But there's no emotional playbook for that. There's no experience that you're going to have had that's going to prepare you for that. And when that occurred, kind of bringing that back to, in the moment, you kind of just go into, like, I just went into like machine mode. I was standing right over there when I got the call. I was standing right over there when I found out like what the path was. I stood over there and cried for longer than I'll admit right now, but long. And what's crazy is I went into machine mode during that experience. And on the other side of it, this is coming back to the leap in the net will appear. On the other side of it, when we were going down the path of treatment, my wife was doing all the work. She had surgery, all the things. You start to realize you continue to progress in life. And it's the ability to continue to progress in those moments that I think, outside of, again, the treatment plans and the support you get from others, that you really start to find what you're made of and what you have the opportunity to choose to be made of. And that's where, for me, leaping in the net appearing, like I've probably done it 3 times that really stand out to me.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, they also require a choice. Like I use the word choice. You have to choose how you're going to take the experiences as they come and what you do with the decisions that you have presented to you for how you react to them and what you allow to be like the net for you in those moments. And yeah, that was deep. That was darker and deeper and probably heavier than you expected it to get. But
no, man, that's what we do.
I couldn't help but the experience part really kind of standing out because it's different.
You learn so much more in the dark times when you're going through some shit than when you do when things are good. Because when things are going really well, you can catch some momentum. And if I think you need to understand and reflect on certainly what's going on in your life at that time, right? If things are going really well, and you need to understand how to use it, how to harness it, a different energy, whether it's a dark energy, a light energy, right? If it's dark energy, you can go to a dark place, or you can go to a place where you recognize it for what it is and understand that, all right, it's time to step it up. This is what I'm going to do. This is the person that I need to become to get through this and make those decisions, and be aware of it. Same thing when things are going really well. You have a lot of momentum. You can either continue to double down and continue to create more and more momentum, or you can do what a lot of people end up doing and ease up, right? Ease off the gas and kind of end up back in the same place where you were, because that momentum can also be scary if you don't know what you're going to do with it. But I do really believe that you learn a lot more and you become and you grow a lot more in the dark times, the hard times, than when things are going really well. And especially as a family, right? For anybody listening that has a family, has a significant other, has kids, like if you're going through some tough times together, to go through that as a team, as a clan, and come out even stronger, like that that changes worlds. Like that moves. It's a paradigm shift in just like how it can certainly bond your family and bond people when you go through hard shit together.
Yes. It's that aspect of like community that goes, it's like, because I think that I believe, I come from a very large family of cousins and aunts and uncles, but I believe that the people you surround yourself with, obviously, will always have an impact on your life. When it comes to family, that is the first core community that you're familiar with as you grow up. And if in those hard times, like my wife and I experienced with our children when they were babies, in those hard times, if you don't show resolve and strength and, listen, I didn't do it well all the time. My wife and I hid in the corner many times and cried. She cried on her own. I cried on my own. We cried together. But like you said, you find ways to get through those moments. And I think I have it written down right here. Hang on. Yeah. Dan said this to us before in the call. You have nothing transformative to offer in life if you have no challenges you've overcome. And that's a strong concept, but a strong statement to be able to refer to for myself. As I don't hold on to that story as something I'm helping others to that was a transformative phase for me, but I'm not trying to turn it into like something I can help others to transform themselves out of. But I can tell you this much, like you said, I would not have been able to get to where I've gotten to without my wife's support of it, even though she was the one who was really the main recipient of that situation, from a patient perspective. And also, I would not have had as much drive without wanting to make my kids see that this is something we could overcome, and that this is something that you can find your way through or back from. What I didn't really like highlight in that point, though, when I was sharing that storyline, is I didn't do it well all the time, and there was a really dark period that actually occurred after my wife's treatment for me that led me to realizing. I think you'd said, I don't know if you said it this way, but there was a point where like I kind of like went into a hole, like the dark times, and like I can like the word dark stands out for me because when my wife was diagnosed, I went into machine mode and we just fought. We did everything, like
Survival mode.
Survival mode. Yeah. And she's a teacher, my wife. And when she went back to work, which was like a year, like a little less than a year later, and we went back to, we'll call it the routine. Like she takes the kids, drops them off at school. She goes to her school, teaches all day, picks the kids up, comes home. I'll never forget this moment. Talk about dark times. Let's say it was like September 1st, but it was the beginning of the school year. The first day she was going back to school. The kids and her walked out the door, got in the car, the door closed, and it was like the whole world zeroed in on me and went really dark. And Brandon talking about the experience of that for me from that moment until almost probably 4 years later, 5 years later, I was on a spiral, slow winding spiral of experience down to, kind of like just a really dark, weird place. Tried to shield my family and kids from it for all the right reasons because, this is going to sound very American male machoism, but like, you're not supposed to be weak. You're not supposed to cry. You're not supposed to have demons and for the experiences in life to have an effect on your emotions, you're supposed to be tough. You're dad. You're unstoppable. And yeah, I think like 3 years ago, I realized that I had gone so far down into this world of just like, push it down, push it down, push it down. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. That it took like looking in the mirror and realizing, yeah, you're so fucking unhappy, dude, with like where I was in my career. I was super successful, but I hated it. I wasn't doing anything I liked to do. And going back, this was in a leap and an appear type moment. And going back to like 2 years ago, I was like, my wife, superhero in my life, as you've probably already started to pick up on the tones I talk about when I talk about her. Superhero of a wife says to me, dude, you're unhappy. What are you fucking doing? And I was like, fuck it. I'll quit on Monday. She's like, good. And dude, she was putting her sneakers on to go out to the garage and go do a workout. And she's like, it was like she had her foot up and she like cinched her shoe. She's like, good. I was like, okay. She's like, okay. She walked out the door, closed the door. And I was like, holy shit, I'm quitting on Monday. Yeah. And then like, I quit that job 2 days later. And, that was a leap in the net will appear type moment for me. That was the last one, probably.
Yeah, that's.
I'm not sure.
I mean, to have support, I think for something like that is huge, right? It often takes somebody. I use the analogy: if your life is a movie, and it's on the big screen, and there's the audience sitting in the crowd. What is the audience screaming at you that they all know needs to happen, that you need to do, that you can't see because you're the main character and you're so close to it? But what are they yelling at you? If you can step back and you can listen to the audience that's watching your life right now, telling you what to do, what do they know? What are they saying?
That's a great one. I'm writing that down. What does the audience know?
And to everybody here that's listening, right? Take from it what you want, but I believe that that's often the case because you can't see the forest from the trees, right? When you're in it, you can't really see what needs to happen because there's so much going on, right? Whether it's in your case, right, there's treatments that need to be paid for. There's time. There's kids that are involved. What are you going to do? How are you going to protect them? How are you going to stay sane? How are you, are you going to keep things on track financially? Could this potentially happen again? There's a lot of stuff that's going on in your mind.
Yeah.
Right. But even in that moment, right, if you can take a beat and ask yourself, what does the audience know that's watching my life that I don't? I think it offers just a wildly different perspective.
That's to tie that back to the leap and the net will appear. If you go back to the question you asked, like why do I think it's so hard for people to leap in those moments? I think if you couple that question that you're asking with that concept, those two work really well to it. Like it's a supportive mechanism for each other. Because if I look back now about the first net that I jumped for, which was, when I left that job and that boss handed me that card, I didn't know what I was getting myself into at the time, but I was willing to go out and find out. And the experiences I ended up having because of that decision led me to making so many more, great decisions that led to so much more growth and progress. But if I think about the moment when I actually made the decision to leave that first job and change my life in that way, which was back before working from home was a thing, to begin working from home and start traveling and doing all this different type of work that I'd never done before. I probably should have even started, like the audience would have been telling me to have done it sooner than I did, even when I did make that decision. And it's an interesting, that's a really good question to add to like your psyche around how to make decisions. What would the audience be? It's like, and when you said it the first time, I thought of like the movie Scream, where it's like, what was it, Nev Campbell?
Yeah.
She was on Fallon like not too long ago when like one of the Scream 15s or whatever they're up to now came out, and he said, what are the rules you've learned from all the Scream, from all the Scream movies? And she's like, well, you never run upstairs. Don't ever run upstairs. Always run out the front door. And it's like, yeah, well, the audience is always screaming, why are you going upstairs? It's a funny correlate there.
No, those are good movies though, right? You just watch, right? You're probably going to trip and fall. There's a few things that like in a horror movie, you're just like, all right, pick up those feet. But if you've ever tried to run scared, like it's like the legs get heavy, and you're probably going to trip over everything in sight. But I agree. And those were funny movies. I like those.
Good times.
Let's.
What does the audience know? I like that.
I want to talk about Starting Point. So, tell everyone here about Starting Point. What does that look like, Starting Point Associates? Let's jump into that.
Yeah. So, started out initially as a sales consultancy. I have a deep background in B2B sales. So, after 15 years of helping several companies double and triple in revenue and size, I started Starting Point to start working with companies who are looking for the same results by providing essentially frameworks and methodologies that help to implement all those different, call it revenue levers. But honestly, I'll tell you where it's really developed now is there's two ways I work with clients. The first is I work with companies that are of growth stage and need a revenue engine. And I come in and I help them establish a revenue engine, because most founders think that they just hire a salesperson and then the company just starts to grow and, add revenue. And that's not ever, they can try it that way, but it doesn't typically ever work out that way well. So that's the first way that I'm engaging with companies or working. The other way Starting Point works, or Starting Point exists, is as a group coaching program. I've recently launched. It's inviting founders into a space where we're working on what I call the revenue leadership ladder. And it's establishing all the foundational elements to establishing a true, from awareness to conversion, from conversion to retention, from retention to expansion and evangelization, framework, methodology, and application for their business. Kind of not trying to pitch in this conversation, Brandon, but those are the two ways that Starting Points exists right now. But work with several B2B clients in building their growth or revenue engines, and then working on the coaching program to provide those same frameworks and concepts for founders who are trying to, who basically who've never sold. That's what it comes down to. When I work with anyone in the coaching program, it's founders who are experts in a specific field, had a great idea, started a business around it. Now they're looking to grow and scale. They've never had to carry a bag or a number or generate revenue on their own. And they hit typically like a growth point where it's like they've sold, depending on whatever the business is, they've sold to all their friends and family. They've tapped into their network. They have clients and they're successful, but they just don't know how to get it out there in a way that will start to feed itself. And that's what the coaching program is about. It's new, but go ahead. Sorry.
I think that's a pretty common thing when you're starting out, when you're starting a new business, right? You kind of reach out to everybody you know, to your network. You're saying, hey, we're taking on this. If you know anybody, whether it's selling real estate, whether it's starting a plumbing contracting company, HVAC, lawn care, like it doesn't really matter. But a lot of times you're going to be starting out. And then you kind of hit up everybody, you tap out all your resources, and now you realize, all right, we kind of need to scale. We've run out of referrals. We've run out of word of mouth. We need to now start stepping stuff up and get in front of as many people as possible. But that is a big barrier for a lot of people because they really don't know where to start, right? It's do we start knocking on doors? How do we do that effectively? Do we start reaching out to, cold reach out on LinkedIn? How do we do that? What do I say? How do we get open rates? Do I start a newsletter? How do I do that? Which is the right program? Like there's all of these things. Back to your point that we were talking about earlier about needing the shoes, needing the equipment, needing the gym membership, needing the protein and the pre-workout, needing all of these things. It can become very overwhelming, rather than just starting with something and figuring out what you need. And I think that, or where that's going to go, but working with somebody, working with a coach that has a plan, you can trade money for that. You can trade money for somebody that knows exactly where you've been, where they're going to take you, and show you that roadmap of what you can do so you can make that money back a lot faster. But people get nervous about that. Because again, I think that there's a lot of noise out there, especially, there's so many coaching programs out there, and it's really tough for people to understand who's doing what well, which program to invest in. There's a million different programs that you can take. It's the same thing as AI, like which tech stack do we work? Is it ChatGPT? Now it's Claude. Now it's Manus. Now it's back to Claude.
All
now
over
it's
the place.
like ChatGPT works okay, but it's all of this. So rather than investing in anything, you don't invest in anything at all. Rather investing in something, you don't invest in anything at all, and you sort of stay where you are. But what are some of those barriers that you find people get themselves into? They've sort of tapped out their resources. They're looking to scale. What's really stopping them? Is it a block mentally? Is it just something as tactical as not knowing what to do? Is it not feeling confident in the decisions that they're going to be making? What usually comes up with those founders that are getting blocked and don't see the next steps in how to scale?
Not to put tongue in cheek, but the whole starting point name kind of touches on what your question is asking, which is everyone's going to be coming from a different starting point when I start talking with them or working with them in, say, like a business case. But when it comes to the coaching side, it's much more getting an understanding what the foundations are that are needed to be successful in growing your business from a sales perspective. Like a lot of people just think the first barrier is there's a philosophical belief you just hire a salesperson and they'll figure it out. If I found anything to be common, it's that point. It's, well, I just hire a salesperson. Oh, I'm trying to grow my business. We've hit X number, we've hit $1 million, $2 million, $5 million in revenue. I've got a few people in the back end to help me, but we're trying to scale, so I'm going to hire sales. So the first question I ask them is kind of going to use your like barbell protein, equipment concept here. Okay, great. So what's the first thing that you're going to tell them they're supposed to say that works well to build awareness and engage your target audience? Well, I'm going to leave it up to them to figure that out. Oh, how do you think that's going to go? So how are you going to set them up for success? Like what are you giving them? What are the tools you're going to put into their tool belt? And there's this expectation, going back to the barrier, like there's this expectation that like salespeople have this like magic pixie dust that they just sprinkle over, a service or a product or an offering, and say a couple, magic words, and suddenly people want to buy it.
And there you go.
And yeah, and that's how it happens. But no, in reality, again, this is what the program is really about. It's laying the foundation. Looks like, establishing clear, instead of barbells, or the gym mats, it's, we're going to establish what's the clear level of demand that's necessary, and how do you get it? What's the messaging that supports that? So first you need to have, what is the demand mechanism? Why would people be interested in this? What's the messaging that makes that resonate? What are the different roles you need in order for a sale to come in the door? Sure, like I think Dan has said this to you and I, and probably every call we've ever been on with him. You're in business once you have an idea, and you take that idea and you go and sell it. Well, when you're the CEO or the founder of that, or the visionary for that idea, and you sell it, that is way different than hiring someone to come in and go do that for you.
Yeah.
So establishing demand, establishing messaging, establishing roles for the different ways in which that person or people or that function of revenue will exist for you. Getting a sequence. Like, this is, if I say it in any sort of a simple way, I help founders put revenue in the right order. Like, it's a sequencing problem. First get the demand, then get the messaging, or first understand what the demand is you're trying to generate. Get the messaging that's going to resonate in that demand channel. Find the right people to help support that process. Then lay out the sequence you started to talk about a moment ago. It's like, what are the different steps that you're going to take from the starting point A to ending point B? And by the way, it's going to continue beyond that and evolve over and over and over again. And then establish standards for what your expectations are. I saw a quote in one of my books I was reading. It might have been Good to Great. It's like, don't let personal preferences be misunderstood as policy.
Yeah.
Like, that's another big one. That's a big boundary. Like, that's
I put out a video specifically on that, right? The idea of perfectionism versus policy, right? And so versus a standard, right? Perfectionism versus a standard. It's called, and the idea behind, or the difference between the two, is a standard is something that you can explain, that if it doesn't happen, the result of that circumstance, because that did not happen, or what is going to go really well and what the expectation is if this standard is held. Whereas perfectionism is, I just like it done that way.
Yes.
And the perfectionism is what will end up killing a lot of growth, because not everybody is going to like to do it the same way that you like to do it. But if you are holding that standard and you can explain the principles as to why we do it this way, why we follow the checklist, why we follow the script, why we review our calls, why we review the projects that we've done, why we continue to follow up at this cadence that we do, is because we have the data behind it and we know that it's going to provide this result. But if you just say, this is my preference, this is why I like doing it, you're going to run into a lot of problems if you can't explain the benefit to it. And you're going to get a lot of pushback from a lot of people.
Brandon, it's such a good point for what I've also witnessed is not necessarily a barrier, but just sort of like a commonality with clients. So again, I work in those two capacities from starting point. It's, working with businesses, and then also working with a community that I coach. And I've seen this on both sides. Talk about that concept of preferences, trying to establish preferences that become policy, or that are interpreted as policy. If you don't, this is the challenge I found. If you don't establish, forget policy, we'll use the word standards. If you don't establish standards for what your team and or you expect to happen when it comes to new clients coming in the door, growth or expansion within the client, retention or renewal, if you don't establish the standards, like just the minimum standards for how those things occur in like a workflow and in roles and responsibilities, then you're leaving it up to chance on someone else's interpretation of what you think or what they think you want to have happen. Them being a direct impact to your business or your bottom line or your revenue or your profits or your margin, whatever it is. And then you really can't be upset about it then. Like, because it, like, meaning if it doesn't go the way you expected or the way your preference is or your expectations were in your mind. Because if you wasn't, I think you had a guest on, what's his name? Jonathan Ray. Mm-hmm. He talked about the idea of clarity.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that episode. Well, but it was one that stood out when I was looking through your catalog, because that's another element of or another aspect of barrier. I think, like, if the owner or one of the executives or the co-founder is not clear on what they want to have happen for the business in terms of its growth plan, its sales plan, its target audience, its messaging market, its go-to-market, process, and any of those things, if there's not 1 ounce of clarity, then the expectations are.
This episode is sponsored by New Vision Projects, and everybody has heard the horror stories that happen. They have a friend of a friend or a neighbor that's been renovating for years on end, or they've been building a home and it just hasn't gone the way that it needed to go. Budgets are blown through the roof, timelines, forget about them. New Vision Projects has an incredibly strong track record for over 15 years of working with customers, serving them at the highest level. If you are considering building or renovating, check them out on Instagram at New Vision Projects or at newvisionprojects.com. Building the homes you want with the confidence you need. New Vision has you covered. Let them show you why they're different. Back to the show.
They're unfair across the board.
Well, that was a great episode, by the way. So I'm glad you picked up on that. But the conversation about clarity, I mean, if clarity is muddied, right? If you are the owner of the company or a director at a company, or you play any sort of leadership role, and you don't have clarity on what it is that you're doing, where you're going, the ability to communicate priority is going to be non-existent, because you're not going to understand what the priorities are, because your vision isn't clear, and you can't pass that clarity. You can't communicate that clarity and that direction to anybody else on the team, because it lives in your head. And then you kind of keep going around in this circle of, am I doing the right thing? I have all this information. This is what I'm doing. And somebody will do something that doesn't line up with that vision, and you'll just start hating that person. And you'll start thinking that there's something wrong with them. You've hired the wrong person. They don't belong here. They need to do better at their job, when reality is, like, they haven't been communicated to enough clearly, because you as the founder, you as the CEO, you as the project manager, whoever that is, has not been able to communicate those expectations and that direction clearly enough. And and defining clarity is a difficult thing to do if you don't understand why it is that you do what you do, who it is that you serve. You don't understand the mission that you're on. And bringing a team together and saying, hey, like, let's just go in this direction, doesn't really do anything, because you kind of like, they don't know how fast they're going to be going. They don't know when they're going to be stopping for water. They don't know when, lunch is going to be. They don't know how far, if they walk far enough, how, when they're going to stop. It's just like, let's just keep going and see where this goes, and let's just figure it out together. It doesn't really work.
No. I will say, you and I are talking about this concept of clarity, and tying it back to what I was talking about, what I'm working on with my clients at Starting Point. There is a stage of growth where everything you're saying kind of does make sense. Like, hey, you know what? Let's just get in the car and just start taking a ride. But at some point, whoever's driving that car needs to either turn to the other passengers or just say for themselves, wait, where are we going? Right? And that's the type of clients and or community folks that I'm coaching when it comes to, like, the where in the car ride do I engage with a company like Starting Point or JP in his coaching program? Because there's going to be, like, I think earlier you and I were talking, you're just going to start. Like, I'm just going to start, and that's fine. But once you start involving others, and especially for the businesses that I work with right now on the more like, let's say, B2B side, like, there's a lot of people on the bus, and they all have a right to understand, where are we going, or where are we trying to go? We might not get there right away, but where are we trying to go, and what can I do to help us get there? And unfortunately, what I have found, and why I started the coaching side, the community side, is because a lot of founders, again, going back to the name Starting Point, a lot of founders don't know where to start. So they automatically default to the thing that many of them are uncomfortable doing, which is the sales part. And they try to outsource that right away. And sales doesn't fix an unclear message or an unclear aspect of demand. Yeah. If anything, it makes it even messier.
Well, and then you get people selling stuff and making promises that you can't deliver on the back end, and that messes stuff up too, because they were never given the parameters of, this is the direction, this is what we need to sell, this is how we need to sell it, this is how we're going to promise we're going to deliver it, these are the timelines. And if there's any sort of false information, then you've just sold a inferior service and product, because it's going to be an inferior experience to that customer that's now bought. And it's going to continue to post up bad reviews and all sorts of stuff that you don't want. I had I've hired salespeople, I've had great salespeople, and I've had terrible salespeople. And I know that the terrible salespeople, they were maybe not terrible salespeople, but they were terrible for us. And that 100% comes back to me, because I know that at those times early on in our career, I had hired people because you start talking to somebody, you interview them, they answer a few good questions. You're like, I get along with this guy. He seems pretty good. We could chat, we could sit down, we could have a beer. He's friendly. It's like, of course he is. He's a sales guy. But you start immediately solving this pain that you have in the company, in the organization. You start picturing all the relief that you're going to get when this position is filled, and you overlook these red flags that come in, and you don't ask the right questions, and you don't dig deep enough to see if this actually is the right person or the right fit, and you hire
the right time.
Or the right time. And that's a good point. And it never ends well at all.
It's Brandon, I'm glad you're actually able to relate to that experience yourself, because not to say like it's uncommon, but sometimes it requires that experience that you've had in order to understand what it is that I help my community and my clients to do. Which is why I've established like this ladder, this revenue ladder, framework or methodology to follow. Because if you want to scale your business, if we think of even Dan's, I don't have the book right now because I lent it to a friend, but I can see it in the background, Buy Back Your Time.
Yeah.
If you think about Dan's leadership ladder, what does he call it?
Replacement ladder.
The replacement ladder. Sales is the top of the ladder, one step below the very top, which is leadership. So like buying back your time, sales is not one of the first, one or two rungs. And the rung before sales is marketing, which is all about demand, messaging, clarity in market. If you can't hire a salesperson and ask them to figure that out for you. You can, don't get me wrong, you can. And it sounds like in times like, maybe you've had that experience, but if you're not able to hand them the playbook for how you have effectively proven the success of the business in market, then you don't have any business hiring them yet. That's what I'm, and I don't mean that as like to sound as contrarian to like what is the progression of growth of a business, but yeah, I think there's a reason why Dan put that so high in his replacement ladder, because it's the hardest thing to have someone come in and know how to interface with all the other parts of the business if those other parts don't exist. Because sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's also one of the most expensive things to hire for, because not only just as a, from a salary perspective necessarily, but if you aren't making sales, you have no oxygen in your business. So
Yeah.
if you hire that wrong person, and a lot of founders will hire, one salesperson, and they will go out and they won't make any sales, and you're handing over, all your leads to this salesperson with no direction. That opportunity cost is going to be huge if they're if they're directing the ship in the wrong direction, and they aren't doing
Yeah.
what is going to feed the business the revenue that it needs.
Yeah. I think, you use the word leads there, and that's a good point. Like when you have leads, you've solved for the demand point. When you have leads and demand point, that means you have some messaging in market. You need to be able to educate your sales team, and here's the other thing. Like when I talk about sales, I don't think of it as like a person, because that makes it like a personality.
Yeah.
Sales for me is a cross-functional exercise owned by the business, from operations to customer success to administration to executive leadership to the actual sales people themselves. Everyone has a responsibility to sales, depending on what the business is. That can, look a couple different ways. But you were talking about that, like that experience where salespeople can go out and really do damage if they're not clear on what it is they're selling, and they're setting up expectations that are going to lead to, poor outcomes for the client, which leads to poor retention, which leads to poor reputation, which leads to, you could have a lot of cleanup if you make the wrong hire, or if you don't have the right rungs in the ladder that we, the ladders that we've been referring to, established. So
I think
yeah,
everybody in an organization has a play in sales and a play in customer experience, right? And we're in construction, but everybody from the front line, from carpenters to site supers to project managers, right? If a client shows up to their house that we're renovating for a walkthrough, and the house is a disaster because somebody hasn't cleaned up the house yet, and they walk in there, that's not a great impression, right? They're going to lose trust. They're not going to feel comfortable making a second sale with you, or referring you to a friend or to a neighbor. So they're responsible. Project managers are responsible. Site supers are responsible. Everybody in delivery, the people that answer the phone when somebody calls, even like an office manager, or somebody that's sending invoices, whether it's an accountant or a financial controller, whatever that entity looks like in your business. If they don't have an attitude and aren't customer centric, they are going to be hindering your future sales as well. So I do believe that everybody in an organization plays a part, whether they want to believe it or not, in future sales of a product, of a service, in any industry.
That point of whether they believe it or not, that involvement, that's actually a big part of what the work is that I do in helping to establish just a commonality, like clarity, a commonality across the business of where they fit in the cogs of the wheel of revenue. So again, like I call it revenue coaching, not like sales coaching, because you brought up a really good point. One of the things I was concerned about when I was first launching the program to begin with, and even when I work with my clients, sometimes and meaning on the business side, and I'm talking to them about what it is I do, I try to make it very clear. Like, look, I'm not going to, if you want to learn objection handling, there are courses for that. If you want to learn about, what are the other ones that are big right now? Tonality. It makes me think of like Wolf of Wall Street.
Body language. Yeah.
Yeah. Body language, like all that stuff. If you want to learn all that, go ahead. Like I can include, like I do include some, call it like, scripting probably is a better way to say it, but it's more for framing, not for, oh, you say this when they say that. I don't do that. That's never been. Do I know those things personally? Yeah, sure. But that's not what I'm teaching, because that's not the important part. Like you said earlier, there's an importance on the cross-functional understanding of what role you play in the development and the growth of the business. And so I think the point you made around customer success, it's like, if I'm the salesperson and I'm not closely aligned with the customer success person or people, and I go out and I sell something, and let's say it's a really big deal for me to be bringing in the door for both the business as well as also for myself. If I just do whatever I can to get that deal across the finish line, I'm just setting this customer success person up for probably failure in hitting the expectations of whatever it is I'm saying to get that deal across the finish line. So one of the first things I do when I go in and I start working with a client, when it comes to like building out how they establish and grow and scale revenue beyond where they are, what's their starting point, is I look at their retention rate. How are you doing in your retention? Especially if the CEO or the founder or co-founder or someone that's senior is the primary salesperson, it's kind of like a report card on them. And I hate to say it that way, but it's like, you say you have a revenue problem, but I actually don't think, or you say you have a sales problem. I don't think you have a sales problem. I think you have a retention problem because no one knows what you're selling when it lands on their desk until they get it. And then they have to go through the whole discovery process again, or the whole expectation setting process again. Why don't we just clean that up? And just by sheer fact that we've gotten everyone aligned from what's being sold to how it's going to be delivered, you're going to see net gain in your revenue at the end of the year. Because you're going to retain 20, 30, 40, maybe 70%, depending on what how poor the retention rate is. That's what a lot of the work is that I see when I go in, is understanding that continuity from awareness all the way through to renewal.
Love that. JP, man, it's been a blast.
Yeah, we could go for a long time, I think, Brandon.
We can go for a long time. We're going to have to get back and do it again, man. But
I appreciate
in the meantime, where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
Instagram is where you're going to find me most. That's what I'm really working on, building out my my branding and sort of what it is I'm doing. So it's at JP Rinylo. Can just grab the name off the podcast description, I'm sure. But that's where I've been spending a lot of my time. And if you're a founder and you're struggling, if you think you're struggling with sales and are looking for a foundation to grow and scale your revenue, reach out. I'm happy to have some conversations. That's where I'm doing. That's where I'm doing a lot of work these days, helping founders scale their business.
Love that. Well, we'll make sure that we put that information in the show notes. To all of our listeners that are still out there, like always, we're here rooting for you to win. And until next time, stay blessed. Have a great day. Rock and roll.
See you guys.
See ya.